Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the research station, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, and the silence that had fallen over Kepler Station was more terrifying than any scream could have been. Just 30 minutes ago, she had been laughing with her squad in the medical bay, preparing for another routine sample collection mission on the planet's surface. Kepler 442b was supposed to be a simple assignment: catalog the local wildlife, take some tissue samples, and return to the orbital station. The planet showed signs of complex life forms, but nothing that seemed immediately dangerous to a well-equipped human research team. Elena had been the squad's chief medical officer, responsible for both keeping her teammates healthy and studying any biological specimens they encountered. Her medical kit was always perfectly organized, every instrument in its proper place. She took pride in her precision, her ability to heal and help others. That's why they called her Scalpel, not just for her surgical skills, but for her sharp mind and precise actions under pressure. The squad had consisted of 8 members total. Commander Sarah Chen led the team with her usual calm authority. Marcus Torres handled heavy weapons and security. The twin brothers Jake and Luke Morrison served as the team's scouts and trackers. Dr. James Park was their xenobiologist, always excited about discovering new species. Sergeant Rita Kowalski managed their equipment and vehicles. Lieutenant Bobby Singh piloted their transport shuttle. And Elena kept them all alive and healthy. They had been like family to her. 3 years together on various missions had bonded them closer than most blood relatives. Marcus always shared his ration packs because he claimed Elena was too skinny. The Morrison twins constantly tried to outdo each other with terrible jokes to make her laugh during long flights. Dr. Park would spend hours explaining the fascinating creatures they discovered, his eyes lighting up with pure scientific joy. Rita taught Elena how to field strip a pulse rifle, insisting that medical officers needed to know more than just bandages and medicine. Bobby sang old Earth songs while piloting, claiming it kept everyone calm during atmospheric entry. And Commander Chen had become like an older sister, always looking out for Elena's well-being. The morning had started perfectly normal. They had descended to the planet's surface in their standard landing craft, touching down in a clearing surrounded by what looked like massive purple and gold trees. The air was breathable, though they kept their environmental suits on as protocol demanded. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, making everyone feel a bit more energetic and playful. "Look at the size of these trees," Jake Morrison had said, craning his neck to see the tops that disappeared into misty clouds above. "They must be over 300 meters tall." "The root systems probably extend for kilometers," Dr. Park added excitedly, already taking readings with his biological scanner. "Elena, we're definitely going to need tissue samples from these giants. The cellular structure could revolutionize how we understand plant growth." Elena had smiled and patted her medical kit. "Just point me toward what you want sampled, James. I'll get you clean tissue without damaging the organism." Commander Chen had been studying their mission parameters on her tablet. "We've got 6 hours of daylight left. I want us to establish a temporary base camp here, then spread out in teams of 2 to cover more ground. Standard procedure: stay in constant communication, don't wander more than 2 kilometers from base, and if anything seems even slightly dangerous, you retreat immediately." They had been working for about 4 hours when Bobby's voice crackled over their communication system, filled with excitement rather than alarm. "Hey everyone, you need to see this. I'm about 1 kilometer northwest of base camp. There's some kind of creature here and it's really something." Elena remembered feeling curious rather than concerned. Bobby was their most cautious team member, never one to take unnecessary risks. If he was calling them over to see something, it was probably worth investigating. "What kind of creature?" Commander Chen had asked, already signaling for the team to pack up their equipment. "It's huge," Bobby replied, his voice filled with wonder. maybe the size of an ancient earth mammoth, but colored bright red with these incredible silver markings all over its hide. It's just standing there peacefully, eating some kind of fruit from the trees. It hasn't shown any aggressive behavior at all. Dr. Park had practically bounced with excitement. A megafauna! Elena, this could be the discovery of the mission. Large creatures like this often have complex social structures and advanced intelligence. The team had moved toward Bobby's location with standard caution, but without serious concern. Elena remembered walking through the alien forest, admiring the strange beauty of the purple trees and the way golden sunlight filtered through their unusual leaves. The air smelled like cinnamon and fresh rain. It felt like paradise. They found Bobby standing about 50 meters away from the creature he had described. Elena's first sight of it took her breath away. The animal was indeed mammoth-sized, standing nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder. Its hide was a deep crimson red that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight, covered with intricate silver markings that looked almost like circuit patterns. It had 6 legs, each ending in broad padded feet that seemed designed for walking on soft forest floors. Instead of a trunk like earth elephants, it had a shorter, more flexible appendage that it used to pluck large, orange fruits from the lower branches of the trees. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered into her comm unit, unconsciously reaching for her medical scanner to get biological readings on the creature. The red mammoth, as her mind immediately named it, turned at the sound of their approach. Its head was massive but elegantly shaped, with 4 large, dark eyes that seemed to regard them with calm intelligence. Elena noticed immediately that the creature showed no fear or aggression. If anything, it seemed mildly curious about these strange, small visitors to its forest home. "Readings show it's definitely herbivorous," Dr. Park reported quietly, watching his instruments. "Heart rate is calm, no stress indicators. Body temperature suggests it's warm-blooded. The neural activity readings are actually quite high. This creature is very intelligent." Commander Chen had made the decision that would haunt Elena forever. "We'll observe from a safe distance, take readings and samples of its feeding area, but we won't approach directly. Elena, can you get biological data from here?" "Absolutely," Elena had replied, adjusting her medical scanner for long-range readings. "The creature appears to be in perfect health. Muscle tone is excellent, no signs of disease or injury. Whatever ecosystem exists here, it's certainly agreeing with our red friend." They spent an hour watching the red mammoth eat its fruit breakfast, documenting its behavior patterns and taking environmental readings of the area. The creature occasionally glanced their way but never seemed bothered by their presence. At one point, it even made a low, melodic sound that reminded Elena of whale songs from old Earth recordings. "I think it's trying to communicate," Marcus had suggested, his hand resting casually on his weapon, but not in a threatening manner. "Could be," Dr. Park agreed. "The neural readings definitely suggest complex thought processes, maybe even language capabilities." Everything changed when Jake Morrison decided to get a closer look. Elena remembered the exact moment when everything went wrong. Jake had been slowly moving closer to the red mammoth, camera in hand, trying to get better footage of the silver markings on its hide. The creature had been ignoring him completely, focused on reaching a particularly high cluster of orange fruits. "Jake, maintain your distance," Commander Chen had warned, but not with any real urgency. The creature had shown no aggressive behavior whatsoever. Jake waved her off. "It's completely peaceful, Commander. Look, it doesn't even care that I'm here." He moved another few steps closer, now only about 10 meters from the red mammoth. That's when the fruit Jake was standing under fell. It wasn't Jake's fault, or the creature's fault, or anyone's fault. The orange fruit was simply overripe and chose that moment to drop from its branch. It struck Jake on the shoulder of his environmental suit with a soft thud, startling him. In his surprise, Jake stumbled backward and his foot caught on one of the large surface roots that networked through the forest floor. Jake fell hard, his equipment scattering and his comm unit letting out a sharp burst of static as it hit the ground. The sound of Jake's fall, combined with the electronic screech from his damaged comm, did something to the red mammoth that Elena would replay in her nightmares for the rest of her life. The creature's 4 dark eyes suddenly blazed with what looked like pure terror. Its massive body tensed, the silver markings on its hide began to glow with an eerie light, and it let out a sound unlike anything Elena had ever heard. It wasn't a roar or a bellow. It was a scream of absolute panic, filled with such raw fear and pain that Elena felt her heart break just hearing it. The red mammoth reared up on its 4 hind legs, towering even taller into the sky, and Elena realized with growing horror that the creature wasn't looking at Jake anymore. It was looking at their equipment, at their weapons, at their technology. "Everyone back away slowly," Commander Chen ordered, her voice tight with sudden understanding. "I think our equipment is triggering some kind of traumatic response." But it was too late for slow movements. The red mammoth's terror had transformed into something else, a desperate, mindless fury that spoke of old wounds and terrible memories. Elena watched in slow-motion horror as the creature's flexible feeding appendage extended toward Jake, who was still trying to get back on his feet. "Jake, run!" Luke Morrison screamed, starting forward to help his twin brother. Marcus raised his pulse rifle, not to kill, but to create a warning shot that might scare the creature away from Jake. The electronic whine of the weapon's charging cycle was the last sound Elena heard before the world exploded into chaos. The red mammoth moved faster than anything that size should have been able to move. Its appendage wrapped around Jake Morrison before he could even stand up fully. Elena heard Jake scream once, a sound of terror rather than pain, before the creature lifted him into the air. What happened next violated every assumption they had made about the creature's herbivorous nature. Elena would learn later that many intelligent species could shift their behavior dramatically under extreme stress, accessing survival responses that overrode their normal, peaceful natures. But in that moment, all she could do was watch in frozen horror as the red mammoth opened what she had thought was a small, fruit-eating mouth to reveal rows of crushing teeth that had been completely hidden. Jake Morrison disappeared. The creature's attention turned to Luke, who was screaming his brother's name and rushing forward with his sidearm drawn. The red mammoth moved like a landslide, covering the distance between them in seconds. Luke's weapon fired once, the energy blast striking the creature's shoulder and leaving only a small scorch mark on its red hide, before Luke also vanished into those terrible jaws. Marcus opened fire with his pulse rifle, the energy blasts lighting up the forest clearing like a strobe light. His shots were accurate and powerful, designed to bring down large predators. They left black marks on the red mammoth's hide but seemed to cause no real damage. The creature turned toward Marcus with those blazing eyes, and Elena understood that they weren't fighting an animal anymore. They were facing something that had been hurt by humans before. Something that associated their technology, their weapons, their very presence with past trauma so terrible that it overrode every natural instinct the creature possessed. Marcus lasted longer than the twins because he kept moving and shooting, backing toward the tree line while laying down covering fire. Commander Chen was shouting orders, trying to coordinate a retreat while also attempting to reach the orbital station on her long-range communicator. Dr. Park was frantically working with his equipment, trying to emit some kind of calming frequency that might break through the creature's panic response. Rita Kowalski had grabbed Elena's arm and was pulling her toward Bobby, who was running for their transport shuttle. "We need to get airborne!" Rita shouted over the sounds of weapons fire, and the red mammoths continued screaming. "Once we're in the air, we can figure out how to help the others." Elena remembered wanting to argue, wanting to stay and help her teammates, but Rita was stronger, and the medic in her recognized that they needed to establish a safe position before they could render aid to anyone. She let Rita drag her toward the shuttle, looking back over her shoulder to see Marcus finally overwhelmed by the creature's reach and speed. Commander Chen had managed to get a distress signal off to the orbital station before the Red Mammoth reached her. Elena heard her commanding voice cut off mid-sentence, and something inside her chest seemed to tear apart. Dr. Park never stopped trying to help. Even as the creature approached him, he was still working with his equipment, still trying to find some way to calm the terrified animal. Elena saw him look up at the Red Mammoth's approaching form, and instead of fear, his face showed only sadness and understanding. "It's not evil," he said into his comm unit, his voice reaching Elena's ears just before the static claimed him too. "Something heard it before, something with technology like ours. It's just scared." Bobby reached the shuttle first and was frantically working to get the engine started when Elena and Rita arrived. Rita pushed Elena up the ramp and turned to provide covering fire while Bobby completed the startup sequence. 30 seconds to lift off," Bobby called out, his hands flying over the control panels with practiced skill. Elena looked back toward the clearing and saw the Red Mammoth standing among the scattered remains of their equipment, no longer moving aggressively. The creature's 4 eyes were dim again. The silver markings on its hide had stopped glowing, and it was making that same low, melodic sound they had heard earlier. But now Elena understood that the sound wasn't a song. It was mourning. "It's crying," she whispered, and Rita looked back to see what Elena was seeing. The Red Mammoth was gently touching the pieces of their scattered equipment with its feeding appendage, the same appendage that had just... Elena couldn't finish the thought. But the creature's posture spoke of confusion and regret, as if it was slowly remembering what it had done and couldn't understand why. "Elena, we have to go," Rita said gently, seeing the expression on the medic's face. The shuttle lifted off smoothly, carrying Elena and Rita away from the clearing, away from the Red Mammoth, and away from the remains of their squad. Bobby set course for the orbital station, his voice tight with controlled emotion as he radioed their situation to the station commander. Elena spent the flight back to orbit staring down at the forest below, watching the clearing grow smaller until she couldn't see it anymore. But she could still see the Red Mammoth's eyes in her mind, those 4 dark eyes that had blazed with terror and pain and confusion. She kept thinking about Dr. Park's last words, about how something had hurt the creature before, how it had associated their technology with past trauma. "It wasn't evil," she said aloud, echoing Park's final observation. Rita looked over at her with concern. "Elena, that thing killed our entire squad. Marcus, the twins, Commander Chen, Dr. Park. They're all gone because of it." Elena nodded, tears finally starting to flow down her cheeks. "I know. But it wasn't evil. It was just... broken." The orbital station's medical bay became Elena's refuge for the next several days. The station commander, a gruff man named Captain Morrison, who was unfortunately no relation to the twins despite sharing their surname, wanted to immediately organize a military response to eliminate the creature that had killed 5 of his people. Elena found herself arguing against that response, though she couldn't fully explain why, even to herself. "We need to understand what happened first," she told Captain Morrison during their debriefing session. Dr. Park believed the creature had been traumatized by previous contact with technology similar to ours. If that's true, then it might not be naturally aggressive. Captain Morrison looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Elena, I understand you've been through trauma, and I'm ordering you to report to the station counselor. But that creature killed 5 people. We can't ignore that." "I'm not asking you to ignore it," Elena replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm asking you to postpone any military action until we understand what we're dealing with. Give me time to study the data Dr. Park collected." Let me review the biological scans I took. Maybe there's something we missed. Captain Morrison studied her for a long moment. Elena, you're one of the best medical officers I've worked with, and I respect your judgment. But you're also the sole survivor of an attack that killed your entire squad. I need to know that your recommendation is coming from scientific analysis, not from trauma response. Elena met his eyes steadily. Sir, my entire career has been built on helping and healing others. If I thought that creature was simply a mindless killer, I would be the first to recommend putting it down to protect future research teams. But something about this doesn't add up. The creature showed no aggressive behavior for hours before the incident. It only turned violent when Jake fell and our equipment made loud noises. That suggests a trigger response, not natural predatory behavior. After 3 days of studying the data and arguing with Station Command, Elena finally got her answer about what had happened to the red mammoth. Dr. Park's biological scanner had been recording continuously during their observation period, and the data it collected told a story that broke Elena's heart. The red mammoth's hide showed old scars, barely visible beneath its red coloring, that matched energy weapon burns. Someone had shot this creature before, multiple times, with weapons very similar to the ones Elena's squad had carried. The scars were old, probably years old, but they covered the creature's torso and legs in a pattern that suggested prolonged torture rather than a quick hunt. More damning was the data about the creature's neural patterns. Dr. Park's scanner had detected what could only be described as trauma responses in the red mammoth's brain chemistry. When Jake fell and the electronic equipment made sudden noises, the creature's stress hormones had spiked to levels that indicated panic, not aggression. Elena stared at the data readouts and felt the last of her anger toward the red mammoth drain away, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. Someone had tortured this intelligent, peaceful creature. Someone had hurt it so badly that the sound of human technology triggered a trauma response that overrode its natural herbivorous instincts. Her squad mates had died not because they encountered a monster, but because they had encountered a victim. Elena made her decision that night, lying in her bunk aboard the orbital station and staring up at the metal ceiling. Captain Morrison was planning to send down a military team to hunt and kill the red mammoth. He had given Elena 1 more day to finish her analysis, and then the creature that had killed her friends would be eliminated. But Elena knew that killing the red mammoth wouldn't bring her squad mates back, and it wouldn't prevent future tragedies if more traumatized creatures were out there. Someone needed to try a different approach. Someone needed to try healing instead of revenge. Elena began planning her return to the planet's surface, this time alone and carrying medical supplies instead of weapons. She told herself she was being logical, that understanding the creature was the key to preventing future incidents. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. She was going back because a wounded creature needed help, and Elena Vasquez had never been able to turn her back on anything that needed healing, no matter what it had done to her. The decision felt both terrifying and inevitable, like stepping off a cliff while somehow knowing she would learn to fly on the way down. Elena's hands shook as she sealed her environmental suit and ran through the pre-flight checklist for the small medical shuttle she had quietly requisitioned from the station's emergency fleet. Captain Morrison thought she was taking a routine maintenance flight to test the shuttle's systems after recent repairs. He had no idea she was planning to return to the planet's surface, alone and unarmed, to find the creature that had killed her entire squad. The shuttle was designed for medical evacuations and humanitarian missions. Unlike the military craft that Captain Morrison was preparing to send down, Elena's shuttle carried no weapon systems at all. Instead, it was equipped with advanced medical scanners, emergency surgical equipment, and enough supplies to establish a temporary field hospital. Elena had spent the past 2 days carefully loading additional medical equipment, including portable surgical units, trauma supplies, and even veterinary equipment adapted for large alien life forms. She told herself this was a scientific mission, an attempt to understand the red mammoth's behavior and prevent future incidents. But as she guided the shuttle away from the orbital station and toward the planet's surface, Elena couldn't deny the deeper truth driving her actions. She was a healer, trained to preserve life and alleviate suffering. Everything Dr. E. Park had discovered suggested that the red mammoth was itself a victim, traumatized and wounded by past encounters with humans or similar beings. Elena couldn't stand by and watch it be hunted down like a monster when it might simply be a patient in need of care. The descent through Kepler 442b's atmosphere gave Elena time to think about what she was planning to do. It was undoubtedly dangerous. The red mammoth had killed 5 trained soldiers and scientists, and Elena was approaching it alone with no weapons for protection. It was probably stupid. Even if the creature didn't attack her immediately, there was no guarantee she could help it, or that helping it would prevent future incidents. And it was definitely against direct orders. Captain Morrison had explicitly forbidden any surface missions until the military team could neutralize the threat. But as Elena watched the purple and gold forest canopy grow larger beneath her shuttle, she thought about Marcus Torres sharing his ration packs because he worried she was too thin. She thought about the Morrison twins trying to make her laugh with their terrible jokes. She thought about Dr. Park's excitement over every new discovery, and Commander Chen's protective care for her team, and Rita's patient lessons in equipment maintenance, and Bobby's old Earth songs echoing through the shuttle during long flights. They were gone, and nothing Elena did could bring them back. But maybe, just maybe, she could prevent their deaths from leading to more violence and tragedy. Elena set the shuttle down in the same clearing where her squad had made their base camp 5 days earlier. The landing site still showed evidence of their presence: scorch marks from their portable equipment, disturbed earth where they had set up their temporary shelters, and scattered debris from the hasty evacuation. Elena tried not to look too closely at the debris, not ready to face the possibility of finding personal items that had belonged to her deceased squad mates. She spent an hour carefully setting up her medical equipment in the shuttle, making sure everything was easily accessible and properly calibrated. The shuttle's medical scanners were more advanced than the portable units Dr. Park had carried, capable of detailed biological analysis from a distance of up to several kilometers. Elena activated the scanners and began searching for the red mammoth's distinctive biological signature. She found the creature about 2 kilometers north of the clearing, in a part of the forest where the purple trees grew even taller, and the golden sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. Elena's scanners immediately detected something that made her heart race with excitement and concern. The red mammoth's biological readings had changed dramatically since her squad's first encounter with it. The creature was injured. Elena studied the scanner data with growing alarm. The red mammoth showed signs of significant trauma, including internal bleeding, elevated stress hormones, and what appeared to be severe psychological distress. Its heart rate was erratic, its body temperature was fluctuating wildly, and its neural activity patterns suggested an animal in constant pain. At first, Elena assumed the injuries must have resulted from Marcus's pulse rifle attacks during the confrontation that killed her squad. But as she analyzed the data more carefully, a different picture emerged. The creature's wounds were too extensive and too varied to have come from the brief firefight with her teammates. The red mammoth had been injured for much longer than 5 days. Elena's medical training allowed her to recognize the signs of chronic trauma and ongoing physical abuse. The creature's scars weren't just from ancient attacks. They were from repeated, systematic torture that had continued over a long period of time. Someone had been hurting this animal regularly, probably for years. Elena felt a familiar surge of protective anger, the same emotion that had driven her to become a doctor in the first place. She had grown up watching her grandmother suffer from a chronic illness, while uncaring doctors dismissed her pain and refused to provide adequate treatment. That experience had taught Elena that healing was about more than just medical knowledge. It was about seeing the person or creature in front of you as deserving of care and respect, regardless of their circumstances. The red mammoth was suffering, and Elena couldn't ignore that suffering just because the creature had killed her friends. She loaded her portable medical kit with supplies specifically chosen for treating large animal injuries, including powerful painkillers, tissue regeneration stimulators, and emergency surgical tools. Elena had studied veterinary medicine alongside human medicine during her training, and she had treated injured animals on several previous missions. The red mammoth might be an alien creature, but biology was biology. Injuries needed treatment, pain needed relief, and trauma needed careful, patient care. Elena approached the red mammoth's location on foot, moving slowly and making no attempt to hide her presence. The creature's enhanced senses would detect her long before she could see it, and Elena wanted to give it plenty of time to decide whether to flee or attack. She kept her medical scanner active, monitoring the red mammoth's stress levels and watching for signs that her approach was triggering another panic response. She found the creature in a small clearing where several of the massive trees had fallen, creating a natural shelter from the elements. The red mammoth was lying on its side, and Elena's first close look at it in 5 days made her gasp with shock and sympathy. The creature was clearly dying. Its beautiful red hide was marked with fresh wounds that leaked a silver fluid Elena assumed was blood. The silver circuit-like markings that had seemed so decorative during their first encounter were now dim and flickering erratically. The red mammoth's 4 eyes were clouded with pain, and its breathing was labored and irregular. Most heartbreaking of all, the creature was making the same low, melodic sound Elena had heard before, but now she could clearly hear it for what it was. A song of mourning and regret, repeated over and over like a prayer or a confession. Elena stopped about 20 meters away from the red mammoth and slowly sat down on the forest floor, making herself as non-threatening as possible. The creature's 4 eyes focused on her with obvious recognition, and Elena saw its massive body tense in preparation for either flight or fight. "I know you remember me," Elena said softly, knowing the creature probably couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey peaceful intentions. "I was with the people who scared you. I know what happened, and I know why you did what you did." The red mammoth's head lifted slightly, and Elena was amazed to see what looked like confusion in its large, dark eyes. The creature was clearly intelligent enough to remember the confrontation that had killed her squad, but it seemed surprised that Elena was approaching alone and without weapons. Elena kept talking, her voice gentle and reassuring. "I'm not here to hurt you. I can see that you're injured, and I want to help. I know that might sound strange, considering what happened to my friends, but I'm a doctor. My job is to heal, not to hurt." She slowly reached into her medical kit and pulled out a portable scanner, being careful to move in a way that wouldn't startle the creature. The red mammoth watched her every movement with tense attention, but it didn't flee or attack. Elena activated the scanner and began taking detailed readings of the creature's injuries. What she discovered made her feel sick with anger and sadness. The red mammoth had been systematically tortured, probably by whoever had made the old weapon scars on its hide. The recent injuries included energy burns, chemical burns, and what appeared to be surgical cuts made without any attempt at anesthesia or proper medical care. Someone had been experimenting on this intelligent creature, causing it pain for the sake of scientific curiosity or simple cruelty. "Who did this to you?" Elena whispered, studying the scanner readings that showed layer upon layer of healed and healing trauma. "Who hurt you like this?" The red mammoth made a soft sound, different from its mourning song, and Elena was shocked to see tears leaking from its 4 eyes. The creature was crying, and Elena realized that it understood her question even if it couldn't answer in words. Elena made a decision that would have horrified Captain Morrison. and probably gotten her court-martialed if anyone found out about it. She stood up slowly and began walking toward the injured creature, her medical kit in one hand and her scanner in the other. "I'm going to help you," she said firmly. "I don't care what you did to my friends. I don't care how dangerous you might be. You're hurt, and I'm a doctor. And that's all that matters right now." The red mammoth watched her approach with what Elena could only describe as amazement. When she was close enough to touch its massive hide, the creature made another soft sound, this one almost like a question. Elena understood. The creature was asking why she would help it after what it had done to her squad mates. "Because healing is what I do," Elena said simply, placing her hand gently on the red mammoth's hide. "Because you were hurt first, before you hurt anyone else. Because someone needs to break this cycle of violence and pain." The creature's skin was warm beneath her palm, and Elena could feel its rapid heartbeat gradually slowing as it began to realize that she truly meant no harm. She activated her medical scanner again, this time from close range, and began developing a treatment plan for the red mammoth's extensive injuries. The work would be complex and dangerous. Many of the creature's wounds were infected, requiring surgical cleaning and antibiotic treatment. The old scars had created chronic pain that would need ongoing management, and the psychological trauma was so severe that Elena wasn't sure it could ever be fully healed. But Elena had never backed down from a difficult patient before, and she wasn't going to start now. She spent the next several hours carefully treating the red mammoth's most serious injuries. The creature remained amazingly calm and cooperative, seeming to understand that Elena was trying to help. When she needed to clean infected wounds with antiseptic that would cause temporary pain, the red mammoth held perfectly still and only made soft sounds of discomfort. When she administered pain medication through injection ports that she carefully placed in areas with minimal nerve sensitivity, the creature actually seemed to relax and become more trusting. Elena had treated many different species during her career, but she had never encountered a patient that was so clearly intelligent and so obviously grateful for care. The red mammoth watched her every movement with keen interest, and Elena got the impression that it was learning from what she was doing, possibly so it could care for others of its kind who might be injured. As Elena worked, she found herself talking to the creature about her squad mates, about her own background and training, and about her philosophy of medicine and healing. The red mammoth listened to everything, occasionally making soft sounds that felt like responses or questions. "Marcus Torres was our security specialist," Elena found herself saying as she cleaned a particularly nasty chemical burn on the creature's flank. "He was always worried about everyone else, always trying to take care of the team. He would have understood why I'm helping you, I think." Marcus believed that protecting people sometimes meant taking risks that other people wouldn't understand. The red mammoth made a low, mournful sound at the mention of Marcus's name, and Elena realized the creature remembered him specifically. "The Morrison twins were scouts and trackers," Elena continued, moving on to treat a series of surgical cuts that looked like they had been made by someone studying the creature's muscle structure. "Jake and Luke were always competing with each other, but they loved each other more than anything else in the world. They died trying to help each other." Elena's voice caught as she remembered Luke rushing forward to save his twin brother, only to die in the same terrible way. The red mammoth seemed to sense her emotional pain and made a gentle sound, almost like it was trying to comfort her. "Dr. Park was our xenobiologist," Elena said, steadying her voice and continuing her work. "He studied alien life forms, but he always respected them. He never saw other species as just specimens or curiosities. He saw them as fellow living beings deserving of understanding and respect. In his last moments, he was still trying to help you, still trying to understand why you were so afraid." The red mammoth's 4 eyes seemed to brighten at the mention of Dr. Park, and Elena got the distinct impression that the creature had somehow understood what Park was trying to do during those final moments. "Commander Chen was our leader," Elena continued, working on a set of energy weapon scars that looked particularly old and painful. She always put her team first, always tried to keep everyone safe. She would have wanted me to understand what really happened, to find a way to prevent future tragedies. Elena paused in her work and looked directly into the Red Mammoth's eyes. Rita Kowalski was our equipment specialist, and Bobby Singh was our pilot. They got me away from the clearing when everything went wrong. They saved my life so that I could be here right now, helping you. The creature made another soft sound, and Elena was amazed to realize that it sounded like an expression of gratitude. As the day progressed and Elena continued treating the Red Mammoth's injuries, she began to piece together a more complete picture of what had happened to the creature. The pattern of wounds, the types of medical procedures that had been performed without anesthesia, and the systematic nature of the trauma all pointed to the same conclusion. Someone had been conducting illegal medical experiments on the Red Mammoth and probably others of its species. The torture had been methodical and scientific, designed to study the creature's biology and pain responses rather than to simply cause suffering for its own sake. But the end result was the same. An intelligent, peaceful creature had been driven to the edge of madness by prolonged abuse. Elena's anger at the unknown torturers burned steady and cold as she worked to undo the damage they had caused. Whoever had hurt the Red Mammoth had violated every principle of medical ethics that Elena held sacred. They had taken a being capable of thought and emotion and treated it like a laboratory specimen, ignoring its pain and terror for the sake of their research. But Elena also began to understand something else as she worked with the Red Mammoth throughout the day. The creature's attack on her squad hadn't been random violence or predatory behavior. It had been a trauma response triggered by the sight and sound of equipment similar to what its torturers had used. When Jake Morrison had fallen and their communication equipment had made sudden electronic noises, the Red Mammoth's damaged psyche had interpreted the situation as the return of its abusers. The creature had attacked Elena's squad not because it wanted to hurt them, but because it was terrified and desperate to defend itself from what it perceived as another round of torture. Elena's squad mates had died because they had accidentally triggered a traumatized animal's fight-or-flight response. They had been victims of someone else's cruelty, just as much as the Red Mammoth had been. As the sun began to set through the purple and gold canopy above them, Elena finished treating the most serious of the Red Mammoth's injuries. The creature's vital signs had stabilized, its pain levels had decreased significantly, and the infected wounds were showing early signs of healing. But Elena knew that the physical injuries were only part of the Red Mammoth's problems. The psychological trauma would take much longer to heal, and Elena couldn't provide that kind of treatment in a single day. "I need to go back to my shuttle for the night," Elena told the creature as she packed up her medical supplies. "But I'll come back tomorrow with more medicine and equipment. We're going to get you healthy again, I promise." The Red Mammoth made a soft sound that Elena interpreted as both gratitude and sadness. The creature didn't want her to leave, but it understood that she needed rest and supplies. Elena walked back to her shuttle as darkness fell over the alien forest, her mind spinning with plans for the Red Mammoth's continued care and treatment. She would need to return to the orbital station soon to avoid suspicion from Captain Morrison, but she was already planning her next unauthorized medical mission to the planet's surface. For the first time since losing her squad mates, Elena felt like she was doing something useful, something that would honor their memory better than revenge ever could. She was healing instead of hurting, building instead of destroying, and maybe, just maybe, preventing future tragedies by addressing their root cause. The Red Mammoth needed more than just medical treatment. It needed time, patience, and someone who could help it learn to trust again. Elena was prepared to be that someone, no matter how long it took or what personal risks she had to accept. She had found her patient, and she wasn't going to abandon it the way its previous captors had. Elena spent the night in her shuttle, developing detailed treatment plans and preparing for what she knew would be a long, complex healing process for both the red mammoth's body and its traumatized mind. Elena returned to the red mammoth's forest clearing early the next morning, carrying twice as much medical equipment as she had managed the day before. She had spent most of the night fabricating a cover story for Captain Morrison about extended atmospheric readings and shuttle maintenance requirements, buying herself at least another week before anyone would question her repeated surface missions. The red mammoth was awake and waiting for her when she arrived. The creature had moved from its previous position, no longer lying helplessly on its side, but sitting upright in a posture that suggested it felt stronger and more alert. Elena was pleased to see that the most serious wounds she had treated were showing excellent signs of healing, and the creature's vital signs had continued to improve throughout the night. "Good morning," Elena said softly as she approached with her medical supplies. "How are you feeling today?" The red mammoth made a low, musical sound that Elena had come to recognize as a greeting. The creature's 4 eyes tracked her movements with obvious intelligence, and what Elena dared to hope was genuine affection. Over the past day, they had developed a simple but effective communication system based on sounds, gestures, and careful observation of each other's emotional states. Elena began her daily medical examination, checking each treated wound and monitoring the red mammoth's overall condition. As she worked, she noticed something that filled her with excitement and hope. The silver circuit-like markings on the creature's hide, which had been dim and flickering when she first found it, were gradually becoming brighter and more stable. "Your markings are beautiful," Elena told the red mammoth as she carefully cleaned a healing surgical incision. "I think they might be some kind of biological display system, maybe connected to your emotional state or health levels." The creature made a sound that Elena interpreted as agreement, and she noticed that the silver markings pulsed gently in response to her voice. Elena wondered if the markings might be part of how the red mammoth species communicated with each other, a visual language that complemented their musical vocalizations. As Elena continued treating the creature's injuries, she began to notice patterns in the red mammoth's responses that suggested it was trying to communicate more complex ideas. When she worked on certain scars, the creature would make specific sounds and gesture with its flexible feeding appendage toward different parts of the forest. When Elena followed these gestures with her scanner, she discovered traces of artificial materials and energy weapon residue, evidence of where the creature's torturers had conducted their experiments. "You're trying to show me where they hurt you," Elena realized, studying her scanner readings. "There are multiple sites throughout this area where someone set up equipment and conducted medical procedures." The red mammoth made a sound of confirmation, and Elena felt her anger at the unknown experimenters burn even hotter. The systematic nature of the abuse was becoming clearer as the creature shared its traumatic memories with her. Someone had established multiple research stations throughout this part of the forest, turning what should have been a peaceful habitat into a network of torture chambers. Elena spent the morning following the red mammoth's directions to various locations where experiments had been conducted. At each site, she found evidence of sophisticated medical equipment, surgical procedures, and pain-inducing treatments that had been performed without any regard for the creature's well-being. Her scanner detected trace amounts of various drugs and chemicals that had been used on the red mammoth, including compounds designed to keep it conscious and aware during painful procedures. "They wanted you to feel everything," Elena said, her voice tight with rage as she studied the chemical residue readings. "They weren't just studying you. They were specifically studying how you responded to pain and trauma." The red mammoth's silver markings flickered in what Elena recognized as distress, and the creature made a low, mournful sound that seemed to carry years of accumulated suffering. But as Elena continued her investigation, she discovered something that changed her understanding of the situation entirely. Hidden beneath layers of chemical contamination and energy weapon residue, her scanner detected traces of a different kind of technology, equipment that seemed designed for healing rather than harming. "Wait," Elena said, studying the readings more carefully. "Someone else was here too. Someone who tried to help you." The red mammoth's entire posture changed at Elena's words. Its 4 eyes brightened, its silver markings began to pulse with what looked like excitement, and it made a series of rapid musical sounds that Elena couldn't interpret. "Tell me," Elena said gently, sitting down on the forest floor and giving the creature her full attention. "What happened here? Who tried to help you?" The red mammoth began what Elena could only describe as an attempt at storytelling. Using a combination of sounds, gestures, and movements around the clearing, the creature painted a picture of its experiences that gradually became clear to Elena's medically trained mind. The red mammoth belonged to a species that lived in family groups throughout the forest. They were peaceful herbivores with advanced intelligence and a complex social structure based on music and visual communication through their silver markings. The red mammoth, Elena realized she should think of it with a proper name and decided to call it Crimson, had been part of a family group that included several adults and multiple young. About 3 years ago, a team of researchers had arrived in the forest and begun studying Crimson's family. At first, the contact had been peaceful and even beneficial. The researchers were interested in the species' biology and intelligence, but they approached their studies with respect and care. They provided medical treatment when family members were injured, shared food during difficult seasons, and even learned to communicate using the species' musical language. Elena felt her heart racing as Crimson's story continued. One of the researchers had been particularly skilled at medical treatment, someone who had earned the trust and affection of the entire family group. Elena's scanner readings suggested this person had used equipment and techniques very similar to Elena's own medical practices. "There was a doctor among them," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. "Someone like me, someone who cared about your well-being." Crimson made a sound of enthusiastic agreement and gestured toward Elena with obvious meaning. The creature was telling her that she reminded it of the doctor who had helped its family. But then, something had gone wrong with the research project. Elena pieced together from Crimson's continued storytelling that the original research team had been replaced by a different group with very different intentions. The new team had been interested only in studying the species' pain responses and biological limits, conducting increasingly invasive and harmful experiments. The doctor who had befriended Crimson's family had tried to stop the abusive experiments, leading to conflicts within the research team. Elena's scanner detected evidence of what looked like a firefight at one of the experimental sites, suggesting that the situation had escalated to violence. "The doctor tried to protect you," Elena realized, studying energy weapon residue that showed signs of defensive rather than offensive firing patterns. "They fought their own team to keep you safe." Crimson's response to this observation broke Elena's heart. The creature's silver markings dimmed to almost nothing, and it made a sound of such profound grief that Elena felt tears streaming down her own cheeks. Whatever had happened to the doctor who had tried to protect Crimson's family, it hadn't ended well. Elena spent the rest of the day continuing Crimson's medical treatment while piecing together more of the creature's story. The abusive research team had eventually captured most of Crimson's family group, using them for increasingly violent and invasive experiments. Crimson had been the only survivor, left traumatized and alone in a forest that had been turned into a laboratory of horrors. The creature had lived in isolation for months after the researchers finally left, too damaged psychologically to seek out other members of its species who might be living elsewhere in the forest. The systematic torture had left Crimson with chronic pain, severe anxiety, and a terror of technology that made it impossible for the creature to distinguish between helpful and harmful human contact. "When my squad arrived with our equipment and weapons, you thought your torturers had returned," Elena said. finally understanding the full tragedy of what had happened to her friends. "You were trying to protect yourself from more torture." Crimson made a sound of confirmation mixed with regret, and Elena could see in the creature's 4 eyes that it understood the terrible irony of the situation. In trying to defend itself from imaginary attackers, Crimson had killed the very people who might have been able to help it heal. Elena felt the last of her anger toward Crimson drain away, replaced by a deep sadness for everyone involved in the tragedy. Her squad mates had died because of someone else's cruelty, not because Crimson was inherently violent or evil. The creature was as much a victim as Marcus, the Morrison twins, Dr. Park, and Commander Chen. Over the following days, Elena developed a routine of visiting Crimson every morning with medical supplies and spending the entire day working on both physical and psychological healing. The creature's wounds continued to respond well to treatment, but the emotional trauma required a different approach. Elena began using techniques she had learned for treating human patients with severe PTSD, adapted for Crimson's unique biology and communication style. She helped the creature develop coping strategies for anxiety attacks, taught it relaxation techniques based on controlled breathing and muscle relaxation, and gradually introduced it to harmless technology that wouldn't trigger panic responses. Most importantly, Elena provided Crimson with something it had been without for years: consistent, caring companionship from an intelligent being who respected its dignity and worth. "You know," Elena said one afternoon as she applied medication to one of Crimson's healing scars, "I've been thinking about what happened to the doctor who tried to protect your family. I think I might know where to find some answers." Elena had been analyzing the trace materials left by the various research teams, and she had identified several compounds and equipment signatures that matched items in restricted medical databases. The abusive researchers had been using experimental drugs and surgical techniques that were banned by interstellar law, suggesting they were part of an illegal medical research operation. More importantly, Elena had found evidence that suggested the doctor who had befriended Crimson's family might have survived the conflict with the abusive researchers. Energy weapon patterns and medical supply residues indicated that the protective doctor had managed to establish a hidden base somewhere else in the forest, possibly continuing to help other members of Crimson's species who had escaped capture. "I think your doctor friend might still be alive," Elena told Crimson, watching the creature's silver markings begin to pulse with excitement. "If we can find them, maybe we can reunite you with any surviving members of your family." Crimson's response to this possibility was immediate and overwhelming. The creature stood up to its full height, its markings blazing with silver light, and sang a complex musical phrase that filled the forest clearing with haunting beauty. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks as she listened to what could only be described as a song of hope. Elena began expanding her search patterns, using her shuttle's advanced scanners to look for signs of hidden research stations or refugee camps where the protective doctor might have taken other members of Crimson's species. The work was slow and methodical, but Elena felt energized by the possibility of reuniting Crimson with its family and finding answers about what had really happened in this forest. On her 7th day of treating Crimson, Elena's scanners finally detected what she had been looking for: a hidden facility about 15 kilometers deeper into the forest, shielded by natural rock formations and showing energy signatures consistent with medical equipment. "I found something," Elena told Crimson, showing the creature her scanner readings. "There's a medical facility hidden in the mountains. Someone is using healing equipment there, not torture devices." Crimson's entire body trembled with anticipation as Elena prepared her shuttle for the longer journey to the hidden facility. The creature made it clear that it wanted to come along, despite the risks of leaving the safety of its forest clearing. Elena made the decision to bring Crimson with her, understanding that reuniting the creature with its family, if any survived, was more important than avoiding potential dangers. She carefully loaded additional medical equipment into her shuttle, preparing for the possibility that she might find other injured members of Crimson Species at the hidden facility. The flight to the mountain facility took them over vast stretches of purple and gold forest, and Elena was amazed to see Crimson's reaction to viewing its home from above. The creature pressed against the shuttle's viewports, its silver markings pulsing in complex patterns as it sang softly to itself. When they reached the hidden facility, Elena's heart raced with excitement and nervousness. The scanner readings showed multiple life signs consistent with Crimson Species, as well as at least one human signature. Someone was indeed providing medical care to a group of survivors. Elena landed her shuttle at a safe distance from the facility and approached on foot with Crimson walking beside her. As they got closer, Elena could hear the familiar musical sounds of Crimson Species singing together, and she felt the creature's excitement building to an almost overwhelming level. When they finally reached the facility, Elena discovered a sight that filled her with joy and vindication. The hidden base was indeed a medical treatment center, staffed by a single human doctor who had been caring for a group of 6 members of Crimson Species, survivors of the illegal research project who had managed to escape capture. The human doctor was an elderly woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, and Elena's heart nearly stopped when she realized the name. This was Commander Chen's mother, a retired xenobiologist who had been conducting her own research mission when she discovered the illegal experiments being performed on Crimson Species. "You must be Dr. Vasquez," Dr. Chen said calmly, looking up from her examination of a young member of Crimson Species. "I've been monitoring orbital communications. I know what happened to my daughter's team, and I know you've been treating this one." She gestured toward Crimson, who was already rushing toward the other members of its species with joyful musical calls. Elena watched in amazement as Crimson reunited with its family group, the creature's silver markings creating a dazzling display of light as they communicated their joy and relief at being together again. The healing she had started with medical treatment was being completed by the most powerful medicine of all, the restoration of family bonds and community support. Dr. Chen explained that she had been working for months to treat both the physical and psychological trauma suffered by the surviving members of Crimson Species. The illegal research team had been arrested by interstellar authorities based on evidence she had provided, but the damage they had caused would take years to fully heal. "I couldn't leave them," Dr. Chen said simply. "They trusted me, and I had failed to protect them from my own colleagues. The least I could do was help them recover." Elena spent the rest of the day helping Dr. Chen care for the family group, sharing her medical expertise and learning techniques that the older doctor had developed specifically for treating their species. For the first time since losing her squad, Elena felt like she was part of a team again, working alongside someone who understood that healing was about more than just medicine. As evening approached, Elena realized that she would need to return to the orbital station soon or face serious consequences from Captain Morrison. But she also knew that her work here was far from complete. The members of Crimson Species would need ongoing medical care and psychological support for months or years to come. "I want to request a transfer to your research team," Elena told Dr. Chen as they watched Crimson playing with younger members of its family group. "If there's a way to make this official, to get proper authorization for a long-term medical mission here, I'd like to be part of it." Dr. Chen smiled, and Elena could see where Commander Chen had gotten her strength and determination. "I think that can be arranged. The Interstellar Medical Council has been looking for qualified personnel to staff a permanent treatment facility here. Your experience treating Crimson would make you an ideal candidate." Elena felt a sense of peace and purpose that she hadn't experienced since losing her squad mates. She was still a healer, still dedicated to preserving life and alleviating suffering. But now she understood that healing sometimes meant making difficult choices, taking personal risks, and seeing past the surface of a situation to address its root causes. Crimson approached her as she prepared to return to her shuttle, the creature's silver markings glowing with warm, grateful light. Elena placed her hand on Crimson's hide one more time, feeling the steady heartbeat that she had helped to heal. "Thank you," Elena said softly, "for teaching me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about choosing compassion over revenge, understanding over judgment, and hope over despair." Crimson sang a gentle song in response, and Elena knew that while she would never forget the friends she had lost, she had found a new purpose that would honor their memory better than any act of vengeance ever could. Elena returned to the orbital station that night with a formal request for transfer to Dr. Chen's research team and a detailed report on the illegal experiments that had led to her squad's deaths. Captain Morrison was initially resistant to approving her transfer, but when Elena explained how her work could prevent future tragedies by addressing their root causes rather than just their symptoms, he reluctantly agreed to support her request. 3 weeks later, Elena received official approval to join the Kepler 442b Medical Research Station as Chief Medical Officer for Alien Species Treatment and Rehabilitation. She returned to the planet's surface with a full team of medical professionals and enough equipment to establish a permanent treatment facility for traumatized members of Crimson's species. Elena's new career became a model for how human medical professionals could work with alien species to address the long-term consequences of trauma and abuse. Her techniques for treating both physical injuries and psychological wounds in non-human patients were eventually adopted throughout human space, preventing countless tragedies similar to what had happened to her original squad. But Elena never forgot that her greatest success had come not from following standard procedures or obeying direct orders, but from choosing to see a wounded creature as deserving of care rather than punishment. In saving Crimson, she had discovered that sometimes the most important healing happens when someone is willing to extend compassion to those who seem least deserving of it. Elena had honored the memory of Marcus Torres, Jake and Luke Morrison, Dr. James Park, Commander Sarah Chen, Rita Kowalski, and Bobby Singh by choosing to heal rather than harm, to understand rather than condemn, and to build rather than destroy. Her shattered scalpel had been reforged into something stronger and more valuable than it had ever been before.